Hi, my name is Dave Elkington. I'm on the board of Chat Funnels, the host of the virtual event, and I'm super excited to introduce Godard Abel. Godard and I have been friends, and we've known each other for years. And so Godard is the CEO and founder of G2, and everybody knows who G2 is, and I believe everybody knows who Godard is. This is a company that is revolutionizing the way we think about technology and the way we interpret when we're making buying decisions. I think everybody at this point goes through G2 to understand better what the company's reputation is and what the features are and the price points are. And this has really been Godard's vision for a long time. As Billy Bateman, the founder of Chat Funnels, was thinking about different keynotes, and we were talking about revenue technology in this RevTech event. We thought there is one person, if he would be willing to keynote this event, it would be pivotal to really understand what's happening in the market and understanding, what's happening in a COVID context and what's happening next. And he was willing to do this. So again, I'm very, very excited to welcome him. Godard, I'd love a little bit of background. If you'd share with the group here, I'd love you to share where you're from, how you got into entrepreneurship, and then let's talk about G2. But really, how did you get to G2?
Yeah, no, and thank you for having me here, Dave. Great to be with you. And I think you and I have both been entrepreneurs in this world of sales and marketing tech a long time. But I did start my first company, Big Machines, way back in 2000. Which was still
that's really early.
Yeah, it was really early, and really in some ways too early, because we did really struggle for a few years. But we were building a cloud or a SaaS app all the way from 2000. And back then I was actually inspired by my father's business. So my father was also an entrepreneur, originally in Germany. Then he moved our family to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, because he was building it was a small family pump manufacturing company. Wow. And really it also spawned my idea for Big Machines.
Yep.
Because the internet was just emerging. And obviously I remember even back then Amazon was already hot, but Amazon was just selling books.
Yeah.
And the idea I really had was to help my father sell his highly engineered complex pumps online.
Interesting.
And
I didn't know this actually.
Yeah. And
this is early, right? I mean, this is 2000 that's first of all a really hard time to start any company. If this is like at the beginning of the .bomb, right? Companies were declining, technology, like there was the bubble, it had burst or right on the verge of bursting. So you were helping your dad sell, was he an engineer then, I take it?
Yeah, he was an engineer, and the pumps were very engineered. And so when I was talking about the internet, he just said to me, hey, it's not gonna be relevant for my business.
Yeah.
He was back in Pittsburgh. I was already out in the Silicon Valley. I'd gone out there for school. I was working with another startup. And so, like everyone in the Valley, I'm like, no, Dad, the internet's gonna change everything. Yeah. He's like, look, every pump we sell is custom configured, where we have different motors, couplings, housings based on the customer's applications. And I need smart German pump engineers to help the customer pick the right pump. But then I'd really seen Cisco and Dell were already selling high-tech products, PCs, routers. I was
going to say, it's the Dell of pumps, right? Like you configure it. And I just said the word, I realized how Big Machines probably then came about. So what was the transition to then Big Machines from the pumps?
Well, and I think, but the idea was my dad only had 2 IT guys who frankly didn't know anything about the internet or what you today call the cloud. And so that's where I kind of had the vision, hey, let's build something in the cloud where you don't need IT people. And you can be a pump engineer, you just upload your products, put in your rules, and then you could enable e-commerce for pumps or any big machine, right? Any complex industrial product. But we realized we had to make it super easy. We had to do it in the cloud so that, you didn't have to buy your own servers, build your own infrastructure, which obviously today nobody would do. But back then there really was no cloud. And frankly, that was also what was hard about Big Machines. We had to build our own cloud. We had our own servers, we had set up data centers, and all of that stuff was just so much harder. And frankly, that's also why the business struggled, because in hindsight, we were a little bit ahead of the times. My father signed up as a customer, but he was my dad. And most of the industry, really was reluctant, especially after .bomb, 9/11 happened. They weren't investing in anything. And they certainly, I remember 2002, I was calling on companies, they're like, interesting idea, but when are you going out of business? And by the way, the internet was just a fad. So good luck to you, but I'm not buying your software.
Those are fantastic meetings, right? They really boost your confidence. Yeah, that's most people don't remember this. In fact, I had a conversation. I was in a group that was listening to the founder, obviously, at Facebook, and he was sharing how much easier it is for entrepreneurs to build technologies now, because like you don't have to think about buying servers and like all of the infrastructure that's in place today versus what it was, even 10 years ago is so different. It's so much easier. I think we just are now sounding like our parents. Back when we were entrepreneurs, It was so much harder. It was uphill always. So that's really interesting. When did big machines really become a thing? Like when did you feel like you kind of turned a point to where you're like, okay, this is a success?
It was really, it took till about 2007.
Okay.
And
what was the impetus? Like what made it feel like you're like, okay, we kind of got this?
Yeah. And I think when we realized it started taking off, frankly, was partnering with Salesforce. And I actually reached out to Mark Benioff, the founder, CEO of Salesforce, back in 2003. And he was just starting to launch. It wasn't even the App Exchange yet, but their first APIs, their first partners.
Yeah.
And I saw Salesforce. We were an early Salesforce customer way back in 2000, kind of at the beginning. And Mark talks about in his book where he was just selling to other .coms.
Yeah.
And but so we used his CRM from the beginning, and then we saw the opportunity. Hey, our CPQ, which became a more horizontal sales configuration, sales quoting platform. We're like, wow, that'd be a really nice complement to a cloud CRM like Salesforce. And obviously at that time, especially Salesforce was really just SFA, just Salesforce automation.
Yeah.
But Mark was open to the idea. He's like, oh, great. I'm just starting to build my first partner ecosystem. And, so we signed up early, but even then that for a couple of years struggled because Salesforce was only selling to small companies, but they started going up market. And I felt 2007, one of the breakthroughs was I remember we did a big joint deal with Salesforce with Ricoh, a big copier, or they called it the printer company. And all of a sudden, what happened at Ricoh, Salesforce was trying to sell them. They're trying to displace Siebel. But Siebel also had their own CPQ. They had their own configurator. And what Ricoh said to Salesforce, hey, without a CPQ, because they sold these very complex printing systems, they're like, we need a configurator. And then luckily Salesforce was like, oh, we don't have one, but we have this partner, Big Machines. And we closed the deal. I remember it was like over 1,000 seats. And all of a sudden, big deal, like, hundreds of thousands of ACV. And we started getting multiple of those. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, there's a real business here. And then we were lucky. I think they also, I think Mark also got people to trust the cloud, and so by 2007, companies instead of saying, oh, the cloud, the internet, that was a fad. Yeah. At least the visionary customers started seeing, oh, wow, it's actually a better way to deploy software. And
the real thing. Yeah, this is a real way to consume technology. Yeah, that's interesting. At Inside Sales, and I was the founder of Inside Sales, that ecosystem was a turning point, but you described it right. It was very early, like early in that ecosystem. It kind of worked. It kind of didn't. Building into Salesforce kind of worked. But by about 2008, 2009, it started to become a little more stable. And you're right, bigger companies came into it. That's amazing, actually. So tell me then, what you sold the business, and then were you cooking this idea for G2 for a while, or when did the concept of G2 come to you?
Yeah. And ultimately, Big Machines has become a success, and we wound up selling the company to Oracle. Yeah. That experience, that pain we had putting Big Machines on the map was really what inspired G2. Yep. And we were frustrated, especially the status quo at the time was Gartner. I remember, and Gartner was so key at getting the customers, but it just took 9 years for Big Machines to even get in a Gartner report. It took us 12 years to become the leader. Yeah. Ironically, right after we became the leader was when Oracle called and said, hey, we want to buy the company. Yeah. But as an entrepreneur, that's super frustrating to, take 12 years to be recognized as the leader. And the other problem we saw, it was hard for software buyers to discover our CPQ app. And I remember we had a customer, Rolls-Royce, they make big steam turbines, big machines. And eventually they discovered us, I think, through Google. But remember, we talked to them. They're like, wow, we wish we'd known about you guys 3 years ago. We've been trying to build our own CPQ, and we're not good at building software. But it was really hard to discover, great apps like Big Machines. And so we wanted to create a much more consumer experience. And when we started in 2012, Yelp was really hot. They'd really changed how we discover restaurants and things we might in our day-to-day lives. And we really thought, wow, why can we get more insight on a $100 hotel room on TripAdvisor than we can get on a $100,000 CRM package? And so we just want to bring that consumer model, peer reviews, user reviews, real-time information, and try to make buying B2B apps more like shopping on Amazon.
So that's amazing, because I think any entrepreneur and frankly any salesperson or marketer who's listening to us right now, and we've got kind of the who's who of in the audience. Like it's surprising how many people seem to be interested in this topic, but everyone's been frustrated with this problem of like, how do we become noticed for what makes us unique? And again, that Gartner-Forrester IDC approach was kind of the only real way to do it for all the way through the 90s and really largely through the early 2000s. So this really became a platform that small startups could be recognized way before, and frankly, in a way that is much more cost effective, right? I mean, instead of spending the $200,000 a year fee with Gartner and Forrester, which can be effective, again, assuming you have the time and you're selling into a very large enterprise, it's very effective. But boy, that's a long route. So when did you say, okay, I'm going to go start this? And then what were the early days of G2? Like what was the goal, the philosophy? Like how did you get to the point where you're like, I'm going to go do this?
Yeah. And I think, and like I said, I was kind of cooking up the idea. And then part of the impetus also, frankly, I wanted to get back with what I call my entrepreneurial family.
Yeah.
Because after leaving Big Machines, and I had a little bit of time off, and at the time I was living in Chicago, and but after a few months of not really working, I was somewhat depressed.
Getting stuck angry. Yeah.
My wife and friends were like, "What's wrong with you? You just had a great exit. Why aren't you happy?" And but then I kind of also realized, wow, I miss the challenge, the thrill of building something with a team. And so then I also got together with 4 of my team members from Big Machines, and we discussed a bunch of ideas, but I always had this idea of let's disrupt Gartner, let's change software buying, and ultimately we all gelled around it. And because we thought, wow, if we could change our industry, and also at the time that was when Mark Andreessen said software is changing the world, and we also thought, wow, SaaS and cloud is just getting started, and so we also said, wow, this is going to be an inevitable wave, like someone is going to create this, and so why not us?
And look, I think there was some brilliance in it. I mean, you saw that. I mean, and I think people were questioning, how big is SaaS? Is it really a thing? How, is technology really going to be as big as, people like Mark Andreessen was talking about, or Benioff was talking about? But you definitely were like seeing around the corner. So again, what was like the primary goal? You're like, when we build this is like the problem we think we can solve.
Yeah, and I think it really is consumerizing buying.
That is it. Okay.
So that it's really easy to discover the best app for your business and ultimately even buy it online, just like, we're shopping on Amazon. And we thought that was going to be a massive opportunity because it's a massive growing industry. And if we can and the other reality we saw, and it's still true today, right? Also, software vendors all have to spend so much on sales and marketing. And even if you look at an amazing company like Salesforce, right, you look at their P&L, they're a public company, they probably spend half of revenue on sales and marketing.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful, but it also tells you it's still an inefficient industry. And, because I think that the software vendors still have to educate the buyers and make sure they discover their apps. And obviously you look at consumer products, and Amazon changed the world, where it's going to be like 2 or 3% sales and marketing. And then that also means for the software buyer, that means the software vendors can invest more in product, invest more in customer success. And so that's how we also think we can make the world better, because we can make it much more efficient for software buyers and sellers to connect.
Yeah.
That means the software vendors can really just compete based on having the best products, the best customer service. And I do think a lot of the emerging vendors, like you look at Zoom, and I was lucky to meet Eric Wan, the Zoom founder, early days. We shared an investor, but he always, and I remember I first met him in 2014 because we shared an investor in Emergence Capital, and frankly, I was skeptical. I'm like, why does the world need another video conferencing app? There was GoToMeeting, there were
Man, like there were a bunch, and they snuck up, right? They snuck up and passed everybody up.
Yeah, and really his strategy was simple. And he still talks about it today. He just, he's focused on delivering happiness and, delivering more happiness to customers, to his employees. But he just really focused so much on user experience, user happiness. And also from the beginning, from when he and I met, he always loved the idea of G2, because he's like, wow, you're a great way for me to validate that I do deliver more happiness.
Yeah.
And to actually differentiate, through customer satisfaction, through customer success. And today, I think he has like 50,000 reviews on G2. obviously really highly rated app. And one other interesting story, I think he wound up taking some growth capital from Sequoia. This was maybe like 2017.
Okay.
But I also met the Sequoia partner who invested, and he said one of the things that gave them confidence, and they had to pay, even at the time, a high valuation. Obviously, in hindsight, it was brilliant. But at the time, they kind of thought they had to overpay. But part of the way they justified, they said they looked at all the reviews on G2, and they saw that Zoom had statistically significant, I think like 3 standard deviation, higher customer sat than WebEx and any other apps. Wow. And they were like, okay, this gives us the confidence. They thought to kind of overpay to get into the company. And so I think it's also become an interesting leading indicator of, because the companies that have the really high sat that really take care of the customers,
right,
they do ultimately win in the market as well.
So you look, if you weren't sure if you've disrupted a market, at that point when you have, Sequoia, one of the premium, one of the top tier investment firms using your platform to determine value and market perception and actually paying a premium, like at that point, you've got to be looking at yourself in the mirror thinking, I have built something kind of interesting here. Now you bring up a really, really interesting point. In the sales and marketing space, we've done a lot of research around how many touch points people make before they actually engage with a company. And there's been a shift over the last 10 years, and it's been a pretty aggressive shift where I think people relied on a salesperson to educate. So they would call in, they'd say, okay, tell me about your product, tell me about the industry, help me know what the right pricing points are. Let's just call it mid-2000s. Today, people are not interested in that. A sales rep has basically 2 things. I'd say sales and marketing, the growth title has 2 things that they're trying to do that they provide. Number one, it's pricing, and the other one is kind of key features, differentiation and features. Aside from that, people will find all of the information online. So we know that there's 17 research points before they'd ever reach out to a company. And what we found in our research is G2 and sites like G2 are almost always either the first, second, or third. They will go to G2 to learn before they'll even go to company websites. So what you also identified was the consumerization of research and the buying process, and that this buying process has shifted really pretty aggressively. So let's transition a little bit to what you think is happening in the market from a sales and marketing standpoint. And this is a meaty topic. There's the COVID topic. Before we even get into COVID, what's your sense on this kind of the divide of sales and marketing, and where are we at today from your perspective? Like, are they the same? Are they merging? At what point, just again, it's a very open-ended question. What's your sense in terms of sales and marketing as a role in companies? And to some degree, where is it going?
Yeah. No, and I think it's, as an entrepreneur, right, you've seen it also, it's always been a challenge. How do you get your sales and marketing teams aligned? Yeah. And in the traditional world, it was more disconnected, right? It was kind of upon marketing, hey, you deliver X leads, X pipeline. And then sales, okay, you have to convert, a high percentage of that pipeline, close the deals. And then there was a lot of tension, right? Because like the classic thing was always sales like, oh, you're not giving me enough leads, or the leads you're giving me are crap. Yep. And then marketing would say, no, I'm giving you plenty of leads. You stink at following up on them, and then as a CEO, you're like, how do I sort this out?
Totally. And I think they're blaming each other in every case, right?
And I think that's more of the traditional world. And I do think, because I think ultimately what's changing is the buyer behavior. And as you said, Dave, I think also the software buyer, they're doing all this online research. You mentioned 17 touch points. They're looking, they're really getting smart on their own. And they are finding sites like G2 that also tie into LinkedIn, where they can also blind reference technology now and use a salesperson. And I remember when I started in 2000, right, we got solution selling training. Yep. And the advantage as a salesperson, you control the information, right? And I think also classic sales training was, hey, only sprinkle the information on the customer, but in return, always get something you want, right? To commit to the next step. But it's now
sales training, right? Don't only give if you get, right?
Yeah. But the reality is that doesn't really work anymore, because all the information's out there online, right? You can find peers. And so I also think now modern sales and marketing has to change, where it really is about the customer, it's about the buyer, and about their experience and how do they engage with you. And I do think a great company, also an example of this, is Hubspot. And I think their founder, CEO Brian Halligan, they've done a terrific job of this. But you also see it on G2. All their products have thousands of really happy customer testimonials. But also they've always been about inbound. And I think this is more modern sales marketing, where they've always had more learned content. Hey, educate the marketer for free. share with them how do you write a press release, share with them best practices, and then gradually walk them down the funnel. But allow the buyer to control it, right? Where they can choose to engage with you. Okay, your content's amazing. Yes, I'll give you my email so I can get your newsletter, so I can keep you smart about marketing. And then when you're ready, you're like, oh, I do need some martech. And obviously HubSpot, already knows. And they're actually able, I think their statistic is like over half their business, they actually close without a salesperson even talking to the customer.
Really? That's 50%.
Yeah, and that's obviously they're more SMB focused, so that's harder to do with large enterprises who still want to talk to someone. But I still think that's the trend, right? The software buyer, the customer's in control, they're going to get their own information. And I also think sales and marketing now, in my mind, they have to be very aligned to that, much more customer oriented. But I think also the hard part is building the digital infrastructure. So all that data is seamless, right? And obviously that ideal world now, marketing is digitally scoring the buyer, the user, seeing how they're engaging. And then at some point they're like, oh, wow, they're ready. And just the right moment, sales does their part, right? They do the outreach, they do answer the questions, and they close the deal. But I think you need much better digital tools now, I think, to deliver that buyer customer experience. So
tell me a little more about what you're seeing. I mean, G2 is an interesting platform, and I've got to imagine you're sitting at the top of this information highway where you're seeing new companies submit and get listed on G2. You're seeing new review trends. So I'd imagine you're a little bit of the wizard in the tower because you have access to information nobody else has. So what is the data that is, or let me say it differently, what technologies are you seeing that are solving these problems better? And are there specific companies? Are there trends? Are there categories that are emerging that are really helping solve this consumerization of the enterprise buying experience?
Yeah, and I do think, obviously there's the big platforms, the HubSpots of the world, but also we're seeing on G2 now, there's over 10,000 different sales tech, marketing tech apps. And so I do think what's really cool is now there are all these companies trying to solve all the digital pain points and offer that seamless buyer customer experience digitally. And I think we have seen even in the last year, I just looked, there's over 1,000 new apps listed in sales and martech on G2. So I think there's more and more innovation. And what we have seen, obviously, I think it's kind of in some ways getting more narrow. Like one good example is like Gong, that just emerged, Gong and Chorus, but there's also a whole new category on G2 we call conversation intelligence software. But that's a category that didn't exist 3, 4, 5 years ago. And all of a sudden, right, the technology tipped. We're now with AI and NLP. And I think you guys were early in doing some of this at Inside Sales as well. But where all of a sudden the AI NLP started working better and better, right? And you could parse these calls, automatically draw the intelligence out of the conversations. And obviously the big platform vendors like Salesforce also try to solve these problems. But I think oftentimes, like in that case, Gong, Chorus, whole new category emerged where they just solve that one point better, starting with just sales call recording, transcription, drawing insights out of sales calls. And so I think that's just one example where amazing new categories are popping up to solve one pain point within the sales and martech stack.
Hyper-focused, right?
And I think what all those vendors have to do, and the successful ones like Gong and Chorus, what they also do, they integrate to the big platforms. So you can push it back all into your Salesforce CRM or your HubSpot, platform, whatever it is. And I do think that's the trend. There's thousands of new, cool, best of breed apps. But I think they have to be really strong on the APIs and the platform so that the data still flows and you can be coordinated in your customer and buyer outreach.
I mean, that's kind of one of the key questions. Actually, I was super interested to get your take on it. Platform versus best of breed. And again, I think there's arguments on both sides. I think these API ecosystems are helping, improve the best of breed approach versus platform. But what's your take? Where do you see people more satisfied? Again, you've got this insight of understanding where the trends are and where people seem to be happy with it. What's your take? Is best of breed or platform a better approach, and at what segment size?
And I really think, like, especially as a customer, I think you need both. You obviously need a data platform like Salesforce as your master system of record.
Okay.
And I think, but I think also to really be an innovative company, right, to get the highest sales productivity, the highest marketing productivity, you need best of breed apps.
Yeah.
Because they do solve these single pain points, I think, better. And it has gotten a lot easier. And you and I have also seen this over the last 20 years. Like APIs used to be really hard. I remember, like, at Big Machines, we partnered with companies like WebMethods and Tibco.
Yeah.
Integrations were like months long.
I was going to say, I mean, even just hearing those two company names, you just like, oh, what a morass of integration and politics and policy and just try. I mean, that's very, very difficult to solve those kind of problems.
Yeah, and now I think with these modern REST APIs, right, and also I think the big platforms, HubSpot, Salesforce, they've also built, App Exchange, made it easier and easier to hook in. But I think now, you can do it with a couple of clicks, put in your credentials, right, and you're connected.
Good to go. Yeah.
And I do think, and I think that's what all the innovators in sales tech, martech are doing, right? They're obviously taking advantage of the platforms and just making it super easy for the customers to hook in. And then I think that's a wonderful thing now as a sales or marketing leader. You can truly have the best of breed apps solving particular pain points while still having all the data come together, in one platform. But it does also require, you need very smart, savvy sales ops systems people, right? Because a lot of companies still struggle to actually, in the demo, it always works, right? But then to really operationalize it, it is still challenging.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so what's your take? And I referenced this before. It definitely feels both operationally and technically the sales and marketing gap is getting very narrow. What's your perception as you see what's happening in the market? Technologically, in the new platforms, and my theory, or at least my hypothesis is, when you're selling into martech or sales tech, you need to get sponsorship and buy-off as much from the opposing department. So if I'm selling into marketing, they need sales sponsorship and vice versa, because they're really solving the same kind of problems. But where are we in that kind of consolidation of sales and marketing from your perspective?
Yeah, and I do think they just have to work together more closely. And I think part of it is org alignment. I think some companies are not putting it all under one person. But I also believe really systems and data is so key. And there's also one interesting example. You probably saw Segment, the customer data platform, and I think they were just bought by Twilio for over $3 billion, which was obviously amazing, and they weren't that big yet. But I also think Twilio and others are seeing, wow, like you really need to bring the data together in one customer platform so you can really coordinate the sales and the marketing. And I would argue even a lot of these traditional friction points and the org struggling is because the systems and the data aren't there. Because I think once everyone has the same data, and we can all see the full customer life cycle, we can see, hey, another dollar on this marketing campaign results in this much revenue down the funnel. Once everyone sees it, arguably a lot of the controversy goes away, right? Because you no longer have to argue, are these leads good or bad?
Right.
If y'all have the same data, the same insights, then it frankly becomes a fairly simple business decision. Oh, let's put a few more dollars in this campaign, a few less in that one. Let's hire more BDRs. I think once you have all the data, then
it's easy at that point, right? So, okay, you just hit on like 5 really interesting points. First, why did Twilio buy? That feels like a deviation from their core communication strategy. So what do you believe the strategy behind that was? And then I'm going to also follow up with asking, you talked about data. What's your sense on ABM? But let's peel this one piece at a time. First, why did Twilio buy Segment? What an amazing, really interesting acquisition.
Yeah, and I think, and obviously Twilio traditionally, as we know, they're more about communication APIs, right? Comms, voice, and then they also added email, but they were all about communications. But I think now then they have a massive market cap, right? Many billions. I think my story is they also realize they need to become more of a platform. Yeah, because they obviously had amazing start as just best of breed voice and made it really easy to add voice to any application. Yeah. And then they've done the same thing with email. But I think they also, and part of it also, their COO, George Hugh, whom I also remember, he was a COO at Salesforce. So I also suspect they're somewhat following the Salesforce playbook of how do you really become a platform instead of just being a vendor that has a couple amazing best of breed apps. And I do think with Segment, right, the customer data platform, a lot of what we're talking about, I do think Segment has that, right? They have one platform to bring together all the data on the customer, on the user, and then make sure that your sales and marketing outreach can be seamless based on that. And maybe that's the new platform. That's what traditionally Salesforce has been, as right? They own the data on all your customers, on all your sales activities. But maybe Twilio wants to become the new platform by having all the customer data that's in Segment.
That's what I was leading you, because I'm curious if is this a play for Twilio to begin to compete with Salesforce? Because that becomes a system of record versus a Salesforce or a CRM at that point, right?
Yeah, and so we'll see.
That's interesting. Okay, now we don't have too much more time, but I want to hit some interesting kind of meaty topics. ABM is such a buzzword in the sales and marketing space. Is it real? What is it? And of the things that seem to be working that you see, what are the ones that are working, or what are the approaches that are working in the market right now?
Yeah, and I do think account-based marketing, back to what I said earlier, I do think it's an essential part of this, because it is about becoming more customer focused, right? And most of us in our systems, we call a customer an account, but it is, and
it's a huge buzz. Like they put ABM on their company and they go do another fundraise. So like, what's real of this stuff, and where is the value? And I think you may have just answered it. Is it really nothing more than like just really kind of managing at an account level? I mean, what's your sense here?
Yeah, I think it's really bringing together, and I think also the weakness in traditional marketing automation systems was that they're based around the contact, around a person. They weren't based around, and obviously in B2B, we're not selling to one person, we're selling to a company. And so bringing together all those threads, right? What's all the engagement? And I do think it's this modern shift where you can monitor how's this company, right? Or at the account level, how are they engaging with you? And then keeping track of all the digital signals, scoring that, and then doing your outreach at the right time. And so we do, and we have a lot of categories around account-based marketing, right, that are really emerging, but we do see a lot of those vendors doing well. There's like 6 Sense, Terminus, Demandbase, but I definitely think, and we're seeing the traffic, more and more companies are interested in buying that kind of software. Because I do think stitching together, and in a little bit, it's a different way to solve what segment solving, but stitching together all your information, all your data, all your marketing and sales activities at the customer level in a more coordinated way. Because what's super frustrating as a customer, and you probably still get a lot of this, right? Because I do get a lot of also inbound from BDRs, but it is super frustrating also to the buyer when it's uncoordinated, and some BDR pings you, and
I just had the same conversation yesterday, right?
You just reply, you're like, hey, by the way, you're already talking to my VP of engineering, and it's not useful, and frankly, it's annoying, it's detrimental. And I think that's what account-based marketing systems are trying to solve, is how do you orchestrate in a coordinated way across sales and marketing so that you do deliver a great customer and buyer experience.
Yeah. Okay. So there's value in it, and it is a little bit. It sounds like solving some of the same problem that like Segment was solving. It's not just it's really understanding an account view of all of the behavior, both sides, both the buyer behavior and the seller behavior. What are the most the trending? You talk about, you're seeing a lot of traffic and research around ABM in the sales and marketing space, in this RevTech space. Where are you seeing the current trend of research? Like, what are the categories that seem to be pretty hot right now?
Yeah, and there's many, and I think one of them is one of the ones you helped create around sales engagement software.
Yeah.
And I think, but that has over the last couple of years, and frankly, that was one we also started up before Gartner, Forrester, traditional analysts got there. And what has been amazing and been cool to see many great entrepreneurs. Obviously, you built Inside Sales, and we're now also seeing Manny and Outreach, and Kyle and Sales Loft, but that's just been a new category that's really grown.
Long tail. There's Groove. It's really amazing. And all concepts come, And
I think we only started it on G2 probably 3 years ago from nothing.
Wow. I mean,
it had grown, to multiple unicorns, and and I think every year now I look, there's over 500,000 sales leaders researching that kind of software now. But that's just been amazing category growth. I already mentioned conversational intelligence, and I will say also one related to account-based marketing that we're also involved in is buyer intent data. Because to fuel this account-based marketing, buyer intent data is all about the digital signals, to give you signals on, hey, what are these companies shopping for now? And obviously we offer buyer intent data where you can actually see that, hey, what companies are shopping for what right now. But obviously we're not the only ones. There's also apps like Bombora and many different data sources. And I think, and that's really also the shift now, is you can really digitally much more figure out what are people shopping for, right? And also in the old days, and that's why you build inside sales, the only way to do it in the old days, like when I started, was to call people, right, and figure out what are they doing. And obviously that's still very valuable, but now you can call at the right time, right? When they're already interested, and when you've seen they're digitally already engaging. And so I think these trends, coming together, and that's fueling, growth for for many different sales and marketing apps.
And so I'm going to give a shameless plug for the G2 intent data. And you can't, again, it's probably not appropriate for you, but I will. Just for all the listeners and the people watching right now, G2 actually has a very, very unique data set. They can give you access to the companies that are searching your category, searching your company. And if you give that kind of information to your salespeople and to your marketers, that gives you the ability to engage at a time when we know people are actually likely to buy. So again, I know that you probably aren't going to do it, but I will pitch it. Like if you're not at least considering using that kind of intent data, and even specifically the G2 data is very, very rich, and it's extremely valuable. So I would say if you've not dug into that, you should maybe pause the video, go to G2, go look a little bit, look at it, dig in a little bit more, because I think the cost versus the return, the ROI on this is exceptional. So anyway, just shameless plug. But we find a huge amount of value in it. So I think people would be remiss to not dig into it a little bit more. So tell me now on the just two more questions. With COVID, how have people been? I mean, the whole selling and marketing and buying environment is on its ear a little bit. I think entirely. What are you seeing people do? What are the technologies? What are the techniques? What's working? What's not working from your perspective?
Yeah, and we did see with COVID in March and April, we saw a tremendous surge in companies researching digital collaboration apps. And surprise, video conferencing was up 400%.
Right.
Obviously, all of us in tech, we already had Zoom, but also business collaboration apps like Slack. But we had about 200 categories that surged 300 to 400%. In a couple of weeks, because I think a lot of companies were somewhat panicked, right? Because they didn't have digital apps yet to run their business.
Right.
And I think also in some of our investors, we have investors like Excel and IVP, leading VCs. What they're also saying is, hey, this digitization trend was just accelerated 4 or 5 years. And I think it's not only these broad collaboration apps, but also one of the categories that took off was HIPAA compliant messaging.
Right.
And that's for healthcare, HIPAA being the protocol to make sure it's all secure and your healthcare data is private, but also obviously healthcare, but many industries had to shift, to remote and serving patients remotely. And so we also have seen many vertical apps take off. And so that was pretty cool to see. And also that we could actually help people discover those apps when they really needed them.
You bring up an interesting point. I sit on a couple of different boards and help different organizations. And you're right, like Chat Funnels, the host of the event, went through a full HIPAA compliance process because they saw really an initiation of lots of like health-related services and things like that. So that might be an interesting just trick for the listeners here. If you've not really gone through a HIPAA compliance process, I do know, Billy and the founder of Chat Funnels here has had lots of healthcare related opportunities. So if you've not gone through that HIPAA process, it is arduous, right? It's a security and compliance process. But if you've gone through that, I think people would find there's a lot of opportunity that they don't normally have. So that's an interesting point. What do you like if you were to look around the corner a little bit? These are my favorite questions. No one's going to hold you accountable except we're all going to look back in 12 months. But like if you were to say, I think this is where the next 12, 24, and maybe 5 years out from now, like what are the things that you think are going to happen in, frankly, sales and marketing? And I would open, unshackle you like in tech in general. Like what's going to happen?
Yeah, and I think, well, the one overall good thing for all of us is going to keep growing, right? Software's going to keep eating the world. And I think overall, year over year, our traffic was up about 100%. And I think that just means businesses are buying more software, researching more software. I think it's going to continue to be a rising tide lifting all boats. So I think I'm lucky to be in this industry. But I'd say, just give you one example of one area that I think is going to take off even more is privacy management. And we talked about HIPAA, right, for healthcare, but I think also now, and we've all seen GDPR in Europe, obviously taking off. But I think there's also talk now with the new administration that we've had CCPA in California, Consumer Privacy Act, which puts a lot more requirements on anyone handling consumer data. Yeah. That empower the consumer, right? If they want to be removed from your systems, like you have to be able to do that overnight. And so I think there's going to be a lot more focus on privacy
management. Yeah, I see that. That makes sense.
And there is a whole emerging category. We also have, privacy management software, and there are some vendors like OneTrust, Data Grail, emerging to serve this. But I do think privacy and probably similarly security. And we already saw that this year, where there were also like 20% more security apps all of a sudden listed on G2. Because as everything goes digital, it's wonderful, but I think it also creates those fears around privacy, security, and we've seen many bad examples. That if we don't secure now all this digital data, that we're going to have big problems, as a nation and as individual companies. So I do think privacy, security are going to grow even faster, and we're already seeing that. But I think that's going to continue the next couple of years.
That's interesting. What about from the buying trends? Both sales and marketing technology. If you were to say, hey, this is the space I would bet on, both as a vendor where we're trying to be better, but as a buyer, like how should we think about a different buying process or buying experience from your perspective?
Yeah, and I think one new trend, and it reminds me a little bit of the Epic change emerging 10 years ago, are these cloud marketplaces. And AWS, Amazon Web Services has the largest, but they have a massive cloud marketplace. And we're also, G2, we're partnering with them. So it's one we're getting closer to it. And we also now syndicate our reviews back to the AWS marketplace. But I think the amount of volume, and I think it's also a change in buying behavior, where a lot of CIOs now, obviously they already use the core AWS services, let's say, but also adding on many apps, and they're actually starting to click buy on the AWS marketplace. And I think, and I while we also compete with Forrester, they have some good insights, but they're saying, I think, that 17% of 13 trillion in global B2B spend will go through e-commerce and through marketplaces, within the next
That's amazing.
years. And so I do think that's a big shift. And one thing we're also experimenting with on G2 is we're going to add a buy now button powered by AWS. So if an app is also listed on the AWS marketplace, you can actually buy it as a B2B buyer. And I do think that is going to be a big trend. And also as a vendor, it's an opportunity, because you can list your product on the AWS marketplace, you can list it on the Azure marketplace, you can list it on the Google Cloud marketplace. And I do think this trend of B2B buyers actually transacting will be accelerated by these marketplaces.
So this is the first time I've heard someone be as bold in that prediction. So what I'm hearing from you, and I actually love it, it's fascinating. This is the continuation of consumerization of the B2B buying experience. These marketplaces are going to emerge and develop. And it sounds like G2 is going to become a marketplace just like this, but which is, again, fascinating. I'd love to hear at a later conversation a little bit of your vision. But these marketplaces are going to really drive the consumerization of the B2B buying experience to where there's more information. It's kind of what I said before. People have already done their research. They largely know what they want. They frankly don't want to have to deal with an antiquated sales process. They're going to make a purchase. They expect kind of in-app onboarding and training and that kind of experience.
Yeah, I think that is going to be a massive trend, and it's already happening, but I think it's only going to accelerate. And I think all of those of us selling products as entrepreneurs, I think we take advantage of it, but you do have to get in front of it. And I do think if you don't enable that modern buying experience, that immediate checkout, I do think vendors will fall behind.
Okay, I mean that's a huge hint he just gave. Like, again, I don't know if you guys realize the import of what he just shared. There's an opportunity to arbitrage and get ahead of the market if you can enable either your technology, or if you can enable your buying process to support that. There's a chance that you can actually sell way ahead of your competitive market. So that's amazing. Well, I think we're probably about out of time. What an amazing set of insights. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Dave. A lot of fun to chat with you.
Look, let's make this a thing. Let's not wait a few years till we do this again. We'd love to, as you see new insights, let's make sure we keep you in front of this audience. And just so everybody knows, there's somewhere in the range, and we're still a little early. We pre-recorded this, but we expect there's probably around 2,000 to 3,000 people listening to this right now. So I think the insights you just shared with this group should be able to help everybody sell a little bit more, or maybe a lot more, and be more effective in the way we are engaging with our customers. So thank you again, Godard.
Oh, thanks, Dave. Look forward to continuing the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks.
Take care.